Welcome to Elemental Fun, a historical and cultural look of the elements of the periodic table. Elemental Fun. My name is Grace.
My name is Cindy.
And we are going to jump off the main highway of elements and take a little side stroll down the path we call random stories.
Some things about science.
Due to the climate, not the actual physical climate, but the social climate of our country right now, the fear that's going with this epidemic, pandemic of
technically not a pandemic because they haven't. Who hasn't called it a pandemic? The World Health Organization, but it's pretty much what it is.
With the coronavirus, we thought we would spend a little time talking about epidemics and pandemics and some of their history in our world,
and what you can do to help prevent some of these things.
Yeah, so my main focus will be about 10 of the worst pandemics in history.
I'll have some stuff to say about that, but I can start off with the definition.
Please do.
Versus. So an epidemic is a sudden increase in the number of cases of a disease in a specific area.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, a bunch of people are getting sick in a certain place. But a pandemic are basically epidemics that spread over several countries or continents and affect a large number of people. So to become a pandemic, it must first be sporadic, right? Okay. So first it has to go past these stages. So somebody gets sick, okay, kind of random. Another person gets sick, still sporadic. But then if it becomes, the next level is endemic, which is a constant or usual presence in a geographic area. So, okay, there's a normal amount of this sickness here, whatever. That's like an endemic.
Flu every year.
Right, exactly. Okay. Then you get to the epidemic, which is a sudden increase in what is normally present in a population. So we would have flu epidemics, when it reaches higher numbers than normal for each year. So, and then you get past the epidemic, you get to the pandemic, which is worldwide.
And pan is Latin for all, right?
Yeah, like I was just thinking of another example to use there, but I can't think of it.
I just think of I think it's in Charlie Brown where they're like, Lucy's naming all the different fears, and she's like, or panophobia, the fear of everything.
Yeah, but it's all over the place.
Right.
So, and what's interesting, which I'd kind of like to bring up now, is how pandemics are more of a thing in today's society than it would have been even 100 years ago.
Because of travel.
Right. So, to get to Europe, it used to take a month or in a ship.
Someone would have died by then.
Right. Most people got sick, would have died on the boat, and there you go.
Right.
But now you can go from, the U.S. to Europe in 8 hours. So one person is sick on that plane, then everybody has been exposed on that plane because the air is recycled. And then they all get off and to different parts of different countries and things like that. And so, you see in movies, the quote unquote war room or whatever, where they're like showing the map and like, see, this is case 1. And then in 3 days it's here. And then 5 days it's here. And then the next, the whole world's dead. But that's why, because we are so much more connected. Right. And so easily movable between continents that, you can see it pop here and then pop there very quickly. So it's more likely that we'd have pandemics today than we would back in the day for that, although our medical advances are much better.
Right. So, a lot of the older pandemics are bacterial based versus the ones since 1918 have been more viral based,
right.
Which makes a difference because the whole bacterial movement of being able to create antibiotics um, basically changed
Right. Changed everything.
changed everything.
Yeah. So a quick reminder there
Yes.
that antibiotics work against bacteria. Antibiotics do not work against viruses.
And things like the flu, influenza,
Right.
is a virus,
Right.
not a bacteria.
Correct. And that's why we
So-
get vaccines
Yes.
for, well, there's vaccines for both, but mainly for viruses. That's really the only thing we have against them. If we don't, we now start to have antiviral medication that people can take for certain ones, like HIV. But for the most part, the way viruses work is you just get them and then you get rid of them through your immune system and
Well,
you're good.
that's the
Or
funny-
you get the vaccine.
When Greta was younger. I mean, she's still little, but she'd have like this cough or this cold, and
Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't want to take her to the doctor, and then finally I'd take her to the doctor, and they'd be like, "Well, she has a cold, so keep her home, give her plenty of fluids,
and there you go.
and it'll work itself out." And I'm like, and they're like, and that'll be $150.
Thank you.
So now it's like the kid has a cough, and I'm like,
You're fine.
drink some fluids, you'll be
Yeah.
fine.
It's only like if it stays for a long amount of time that maybe then, okay,
It
it
could
could
turn
be
into a
bacterial,
bacterial infection.
or you get bacterial pneumonia on top
Yeah,
of it or
yeah.
something like that. But yeah, it's viruses are interesting buggers.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, so I'm gonna dive in. I went to mphonline.org, which is a free resource to people that are getting a master's in public health. And they had a whole article about epidemics and pandemics.
cool.
So they talked about the 10 of the worst pandemics in history.
And so, real quick before you go into that,
Sure.
uh, add on to your story about that is that with viruses, basically what you do is called supportive care.
Okay.
So it's like if you're sick with a virus, or like people that are older or have low immune systems, something like that, and you get hospitalized for a virus, what they're doing is giving you IV fluids, and they're
okay.
giving you the supportive care to help your body,
body
flush
fight it.
out and fight it.
Okay.
But they don't not actually giving you anything they can't do anything
Right.
for
And
you.
So, I mean, vaccines are a way to give your body the antibodies to fight it. But even the vaccine it doesn't work for every strand of flu.
Right. So, well, and that's the problem with some of these is that some of them we have basically eradicated. Like polio has been, for the most part, at least in the U.S., it's pretty much been
Only
eradicated.
in Pakistan, I believe, is the only country with active cases.
There's some in Africa and stuff. The ones that I will list a little bit later. There has been some with what we're talking about before with the vaccine.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty much most places. There is still wild cases of polio virus, but it's very, very rare.
Right.
But
Which is funny because it was such a scare
it's such a big thing.
in the United States. I mean,
Yeah.
there were children that were terrified,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole iron lung and everything that goes with that.
I met a guy who came out on the dolphin boat that I worked on, and he had gotten polio as a child, and his legs were just withered little things, and he couldn't use them. But he crawled around that boat like quite impressively. He didn't get in the water with the dolphins because he couldn't like swim with
Right.
his legs and everything. But he just enjoyed being out in the boat, and he would just climb around with his arms and like get everywhere. It was
Wow.
really impressive. He was a really cool guy. But yeah, his legs were devastated from that. But the reason why we don't have that scare anymore is because we have vaccines that work. And so a vaccine will you either get a weakened live virus
Right.
or a weakened attenuated that's the weakened attenuated virus is basically, so it's like kind of alive but not enough to hurt you.
Like in a coma.
Right, pretty much like that. Viruses walk around being like, I don't know
Sleeping.
what's going on. Or they give you a completely dead. They give you fragments of the virus,
Right,
basically.
right, right.
And so what that does is it tells your immune system, it gives it a mugshot. Like, here it is. This is what this looks like. So you should make antibodies. And so the next time you see it, your body goes, I saw that guy before. I know you. Guys, get working on the antibodies. And so you're much quicker to fight it off.
Aha.
So it's basically giving your body the ability to do that. And that's why it's super important to get your vaccines, because all these major bad diseases that we don't have anymore are because we have vaccines.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
And of course, we are a science podcast, so we're going to be for vaccines.
Vaccines.
Sorry, anti-vaxxers.
Not sorry.
Well, I mean, and another, I mean, the biggest thing, I mean, we're not going to get a whole
Yeah.
vaccine thing, but I mean, I get vaccines because of herd immunity.
Right.
The idea that there are people who cannot get vaccines. They
Yeah,
have,
whether they're allergic to some of the things or their immune system is so bad that they can't
they
even
have
handle that.
compromised immune systems.
Right, they
They're
can't do it.
babies, you know.
So that's the important thing is babies. Because
Babies.
some babies can't get, you don't get immunized for the first like 2 months, I think it is, right?
Yeah.
So those babies, besides whatever they're getting from their mother's breast milk, like they get some immunity there, and then some of them are not getting that because they're being bottle fed
Right.
for whatever
Right.
reasons. So they don't have the ability to fight anything off. So the herd immunity by you and I and everybody else getting vaccinated puts a wall up around them.
Right.
It makes it much harder for anybody
So
to
the
get
idea
any
of a
virus to get
herd
through.
immunity, like a herd. So you think about like a giant herd of like antelope in Africa. Okay. There might be little babies, right?
Babies.
But they're put in the middle of the group,
Mhm.
and all the strong antelope are on the outside, and so the lions are come prowling, and they see all these strong antelope, and they're like, I'm not gonna
be good at that.
I'm not gonna try and break through these walls of people
Right.
to get to the weak and the old and the babies.
Right.
It's the same idea,
Mhm.
and it just drives me nuts when people get super selfish about it and say, "Well, I'm healthy and strong. I don't need
So I don't need
it."
it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm stepping
Yeah.
off my soapbox now. I'm gonna slide it back under my kitchen table.
Shoop. There we
'Cause
go.
I don't
Shoop.
need it anymore.
'Kay.
So here we go. These are in chronological order. Starting with-
Chronological means time.
Thank you, Sid.
You're welcome.
This list does not include smallpox,
Okay.
which has killed approximately 300 to 500 million people in its 12,000 years of existence. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
But
Well, when you bring smallpox over to the Americas when they've never even seen it
since
before.
it was kind of used as warfare, I
Yeah.
don't know if they could count it as an epidemic when it was like purposefully brought. But so here we go. The first one they actually claimed was HIV.
Really?
Yep, they counted that as they
Mm.
counted it as a pandemic.
Oh, okay. So I have lists of things that aren't necessarily pandemics, but
Epidemic.
some epidemics. Yeah.
So this was considered a pandemic. It
Mhm.
has a death
It still
toll
is. It's
of-
1960 to present.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. 19. So since 1981, there has been 36 million people
Mm-hmm.
that have died.
Yep.
There's still 31 to 36 million people that live with it.
Right, because now we do have antiviral medications that basically keep the virus load down. It keeps it
Yes.
from replicating.
Right. It started in the Republic of Congo, or
Congo.
not started,
Yeah, the
but-
Congo. No, that's where it originated.
And 5% of the population of sub-Sahara Africa is infected with it.
So the thing that I read on this, I would think it was MSN. They had an article about different ones. Is that in South and East Africa the infection rates can be up to 25%. That's a lot. It was a lot about education,
Yes.
right, and sexual
Prevention.
education because it is bloodborne and
Yes,
you
it is.
pass it
and yeah,
sexually.
and that's So, but in the 80s here in the United States, it was like there was a huge fear. Like all of a sudden, it's like you touched my hand,
Oh,
you
yeah.
breathed on me, we're in the
we're
same
gonna get
room.
AIDS.
Like,
Yeah.
but this is, a pandemic of a disease that is not entirely easy to pass along,
Right.
like all the other ones we're going to talk about.
Right. Well, and again, in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of free love going on. So, yeah, they didn't quite realize that having sex with everybody you saw is not a good idea.
Right.
But yeah, and reminder that HIV also, you don't actually die from HIV
Right.
or AIDS. You die from pneumonia when you get AIDS because it's autoimmune deficiency syndrome. So basically, your immune system is the HIV virus attacks your white blood cells.
And it allows anything to.
Yeah, you basically have absolutely no defense. So you get pneumonia that you would normally be like, it's fine. You go, I'm dead.
Right.
So most people, I think probably the majority of people die from some kind of pneumonia,
Yeah.
like that. But yeah, you're right. It's not something that's easily contagious as the flu,
as
right?
these other ones.
Yeah.
So the next one is the flu pandemic of 1968, also known as the Hong Kong flu.
Or the Asian flu.
Well, I
It-
also
it-
have the Asian flu as a
Well, oh
different
no,
type.
it says Asian. Yeah, it's the Asian and the Hong Kong flu with
There's
the
a Hong Kong
H2N2.
flu in 1968. Death toll was
Mhm.
1 million. It had a
Yep.
low mortality rate of 0.5%,
Hmm.
but it still killed 15% of Hong Kong's population.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah. And so this is 10 years later.
Yes, is the Asian flu.
It was the Asian flu then, and
It was a 2-year pandemic from 1956 to 1958 with a death toll of 2 million. Started in China. And in the U.S. alone, there were 69,800 deaths from it.
in the U.S. Jeez. Yeah, they said it spread from Singapore to Hong Kong to the U.S. and then to others from China.
Why do they all start in China?
Well, actually, so do you want to know why?
Yes, I
Yeah,
do.
because the coronavirus is also there. A lot of these are from
Right.
that. So what the problem is with some of these viruses is these are zoonotic, which means they transfer from animals to people. So swine flu from pigs.
Right.
The avian flu,
Right.
it was a bird virus.
Mad cow disease.
That's different. That's not a virus. And actually, that there is one I'll talk about with
Cool.
the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease.
Not cool, but
not cool, but yeah.
Yeah.
But so these viruses are transferable between wild animals, and so in places where you are in close contact with wild animals, and especially in the cultures in a lot of Asian countries, you're sitting there like, I'm gonna go walk through this place where it has lots of different vendors to eat food, and there's some wild bats over there, and they eat a lot of wild animals. They are in close contact with a lot of wild animals, so there's more chances for that to hop to a person. These zoonotic diseases, and then also they are very tightly. There's a lot of people.
Yes.
So the
it's close
contagiousness,
quarters.
right? So those two
A
things,
lot of people in China.
right? So a lot of people in China, and there's a lot of crazy animals, and again they do a lot with, they eat a lot of more different things than many other cultures do, and just are in contact with those more often in livestock and things like that in close quarters where there's not a lot of proper sanitation and things like that.
Okay.
So a lot
I'm
of
glad you knew the answer to that. I was just going to throw that out to the universe.
like,
and,
I
and
don't
the universe gave me Sydney.
You're welcome. And what's interesting, the coronaviruses are from bats.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. So because the SARS and MERS are both coronaviruses as well, and they are from
SARS is from bats?
Yep.
Huh.
Yep.
Did not know that.
Yep.
Well,
So,
okay.
yeah, that's
I'll
why.
go on my next one.
Mm-hmm.
The next one I have is the flu pandemic of 1918, which I think
That's the Spanish flu.
Yeah, the
H1N1.
the Spanish influenza.
One of the deadliest pandemics in history. Whoa.
Death toll of, I love this really vague, 20 to 50 million.
Yeah, I had 50 to 100 million.
Whoa,
So
that's a
1/3 of the
1/3
world population.
Yes.
Which is nuts.
And the mortality rate was 10 to 20%. So
That's huge.
that's way
Yeah,
bigger.
like
I mean,
SARS was like at 10%.
this is
but that's
yeah,
crazy.
20% I said mortality rate, and there were 25 million deaths in the first 25 weeks alone.
This is mainly in India. That's what I had on here.
Oh.
There's a lot of them were in India. Do you know why it's called the Spanish flu though?
Didn't you turn? I don't know.
Well, wasn't it? So it actually it started at a military camp in Kansas. And it took 18 months to cross the planet, like to get everywhere. Which is pretty impressive back in that day because we didn't have planes like we have now and like that things. Yeah. So it's called the Spanish flu, supposedly. It's from MSN.com. So hopefully they're right.
Totally valid.
But the propagandists refused to publish about high casualties in World War I for the participants of France, Germany, the UK, and the US. But they could say whatever they wanted about the Spanish.
So they need.
So it's a Spanish flu because yeah.
That's stupid.
Yep. So I don't think it actually had anything to do with Spanish.
Gosh. It's in a lot of books though. It's
Mhm.
like
It's a big one. Yeah.
I think it's even in Twilight, guys. Pretty sure. I'm pretty sure.
Vampires don't sparkle.
They do.
No.
They do.
No.
It's in
No.
Pirates World, they do.
Give it the Spanish flu. I don't.
No, I think one of the quote brothers end quote actually was like dying of the Spanish influenza,
Oh,
and so he like
interesting.
bit him. I don't know. I thought I read that.
Hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Twilight people, and yell at Cindy.
Yeah.
You can email us at elementalfunpodcast@gmail.com. Yeah, but what was unique about it was like some people with weakened immune systems could survive it,
Oh.
but then people that were stronger that usually didn't die from influenza
Died.
die from it.
Yeah.
And it was like people were kind of feeling like it was like Russian roulette with it. They were like, "Whoa, who's gonna die now?" Wait.
Well, that's the problem with foods. They can mutate and be different, and you don't know exactly how they're going to interact with everybody.
Very, very true.
Yeah, and so you'll notice that whenever we talk about flus, it'll be some H number. It'll be H and then a number and then N and then a number. They name them that
Now,
way.
one of these was like H3N2.
So the H1N1 is Spanish flu, the H2N2 is the Hong Kong flu, and the H3N2 is the Asian flu.
That's
Or wait, no, the H3N2 is Hong Kong, and the Asian flu was the H2N2, I believe.
Well, the next one's not a flu that I have on my list.
What's this one?
It's the 6th cholera pandemic.
Was this the 1961 to 75?
This was a 1910 to 1911.
Oh, I didn't have that one.
Yes.
There's another one between 61 and 75. This is one of the only ones that on my list that's bacterial.
There have been six cholera pandemics. This one had a death toll of over 800,000 people.
Ooh,
And most
mine
of
was
them
only 200,000.
begin in India.
Yep, this one also started it started in Indonesia, Bangladesh.
The U.S. by the 6th cholera pandemic, they realized if we isolate the people that are sick,
And they don't get
it won't spread.
Yeah.
And so only 11 people in the U.S. died by the 6th pandemic
right.
because they were like,
Figured it out.
we got it. Only took 6 pandemics to get it, but we got it this time.
So and this was the one that's waterborne. So basically, you get
yes.
contaminated,
It was
not
in the-
good sanitation.
It was in the 3rd cholera pandemic
What they figured
that
out.
it was British physician John Snow discovered. that
Jon Snow, seriously, his name is Jon Snow.
His name was John Snow.
Game of Thrones.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. Just checking.
He came.
Was he as hot as Jon Snow?
I don't know. He was around in 1852. I don't know.
Just 1952 people can be hot too.
1852.
They could be too, maybe
Yes,
smelly.
I know,
but
but
all right,
I'm
all
saying
right.
there's not probably
All
any
right.
pictures of physician
Okay.
John Snow.
Fine.
Oh, he was British though. But he was like working with people in like low income, and he was like, wait a minute.
Oh.
This is being
Connection.
transmission through contaminated water, and it's like it'd go through India, and would like go down the river, and then it would like go down
Pop
the
a
other
thing.
rivers, and then people would like fill their little water bottles up and hike across Asia, and it just decimated Asia.
Yeah.
The 3rd cholera pandemic was a death toll of 1 million.
Boo.
But between those two, there was another flu pandemic of 1889 to 1890. Death toll was 1 million. It was also called the Russian flu.
Oh, there you go. I
It
don't
started
know that one.
oddly in 3 different locations at about the same time, which in that time
Weird.
is like, it's not like they were all on a plane together.
Right.
But it was in Greenland, in Turkestan, and Canada. And
That
they
seems very far
all like
apart.
at the same time started having
Weird.
like, they were like ground zero. And
Yeah.
then it spread. So weird.
Weird. Yeah.
Um,
That's
my,
strange.
my next one is the Black Death
The plague.
in 1346 to 1353, also known. It was caused by the bubonic plague.
Right. And carried in rats.
Actually,
again,
they
bad
started to
sanitation.
think that it was the fleas on them.
Oh, you're right. You're correct. It is the fleas on the
But
rats.
when I was a kid, it was the rats.
It was rats. Yeah, I remember hearing about that too, though, recently. When they figured out,
that's
they're like,
how it
oh,
was
it's actually the
spread.
fleas.
The fleas on the
Mhm.
rats.
Mm-hmm.
And that only had a death toll of 75 to 200 million.
Yeah, it just took out like half the world. It's
Yeah.
fine. It's good. Again, but that's again with the sanitation, like similar to cholera, right? A lot of it was because people were just hanging around with rats.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
and then
stuff.
like drinking water that rats
That's
pooped
pooped
in,
in.
and
There
you're
you
like,
go. It's
this
fine.
water tastes a little off, but whatever.
But that's also too why you'll see, like, with cholera, you don't hear about that in more industrialized
Anywhere but
nations,
India.
right? Well, because they
Which I'm sorry, I read a I'm like a personal narrative. No, what's it called? A
story.
memoir
Okay.
of a woman who went to India and she was doing a religious kind of walk,
Mm-hmm.
and she was at the Ganges River, and she said it was just terrifying how filthy it
Oh,
was.
well, they. I mean, remember that cows and stuff there are revered
Yes,
as
and if they
things.
die in the river,
Yeah, that's fine.
they just leave them
Well,
dead
and
in
then
the
in the
river.
city, they have like these big giant pools where people just go in and bathe, and then they drink the water, and it's a very different culture
Yeah,
over there. But
and
that's
and
it's
that's why
it's why a
cholera
lot
is
of stuff
still
is, and
there.
there's a lot of people. So again, the amount of people per
Let's
place,
just say hygiene, lack of hygiene plus too many people plus animals equals
bad things. Which
epidemic.
is also why you start seeing those when in refugee camps. And you'll start to see stuff
Yeah,
spread like wildfire because
yeah,
there's too many people. There's not good enough sanitation and hygiene.
yeah.
And there's not a place to wash your hands.
Ugh.
So it's important.
The last two I have, I mean, these are getting way back in the day.
Mm.
The plague of Justinian in 541 to
Whoa.
542, 25 million people. It
How
was,
do they even know that? How do they count them back then? Like nobody
I
was
don't know.
counting back
They
then.
weren't counting the peasants anyways,
Right.
but that's what they were
Yeah,
assessing.
jeez.
And it said
What
that
was it?
half the population of Europe was wiped out.
Was it a virus? They
Uh,
said plague. I always assume plague with like bacterial,
I
but that's
think
just
that was
because of the plague.
bubonic plague.
Oh,
And then
okay.
the other one, the last one, which was in 165 AD, the Antonian plague. Oh, they didn't know what caused it,
Mm.
and it killed about 5 million people, which back then was like the whole world.
Right.
Oh, they think it might have been smallpox or measles,
Oh, some one of those.
but it was back in the day when they're like everyone's dying.
Something.
It's God. I don't know.
They all seem to have the same symptoms. I don't know why.
Plague.
Plague. Um. So those are those are all your pandemics.
Yeah, those are my top 10.
So I have just the list that I had from the MSN article were like the 12 global pandemics and epidemics of the last 100 years.
Oh,
So
specific.
yeah, and again, the influenza pandemics usually originate from animal influenza to which we don't have immunity to, right? So that's the zoonotics, the ones that jump from a bat or a bird or pig or whatever.
And then there's a woman who gave her dog the coronavirus.
What?
Didn't you hear about that?
No.
I have to check my sources.
Okay, I've not heard that.
I thought
Interesting.
I thought I heard that.
Interesting. So we talked about the Spanish flu and the Hong Kong flu and the cholera. So there was a cholera. There was one in between 1961 and 1975. Another cholera, 200,000 deaths.
Wow.
HIV we did. So the Creutzfeldt-Jacobs was in 1999 to 2001, and so this is the one that's connected with mad cow disease, and this is one. This is one of my favorites. It's a terrible thing. But this is the one where it's really interesting because the mad cow disease. I teach this in my biology class because I think it's one of the greatest stories of like what not to do. Mad cow disease is not caused, and Creutzfeldt-Jacobs is not caused by a viral or bacterial. It's not any kind of vector,
Oh.
or not vector. That's what carries the viruses and stuff. But it's not a foreign thing that's getting into you. So what it is these things called prions, which are proteins that are misfolded. So proteins, the biggest part of their functionality is their shape. Very, very specific, like lock and key in what they work.
Okay.
So when that shape is even slightly off, it doesn't work. So these proteins are just proteins in the body. But they're misfolded and then they stack on top of each other and then they get clogged in places like in your nervous system and things like that. So it's called mad cow disease because the cows looked mad because they couldn't walk and they were like shaking and they like would fall over. But what this is the fun part. How did that happen? Well, what they did was they had cows that died and they're like, what do we do with the dead cows? I know, that's cheap protein. Let's feed the dead cows to the cows. Yeah.
Oh my god.
So they're feeding meat, first of all, to herbivores. So there's that. Um, but so what they were ended up doing was then feeding these prions to the other cows, which then ate them. And then the crazy thing about these prions, they are proteins. There's no like, it's not bacteria, it's not virus, not anything like that. These proteins can misfold, and then they can teach other proteins to misfold.
Whoa.
It's really nutty. So that's why it's hard for your body to differentiate it, because it's like, well, it's your protein, like.
And they can only get it by ingesting these other proteins.
Yeah, you eat it. And so that was the worry when mad cow disease came out, that people who ate meat from there could possibly eat it and then get the prions. And to date, if you are from a certain area in Europe, you cannot give blood.
I know. Even if you lived in England,
Mm-hmm.
because when I donate blood, they say like, "Did you live in England
From
or
this
Europe
date to this date.
from
Yep.
this time to this time?"
That's why.
But like, don't you think it would have come out by now that you have it?
I don't know, possibly, but
I feel like the
I think there's not
blood
something that
banks
they.
need to update things like sometimes.
But I think that they can't. It's still kind of unknown. We don't know as much as we do about other things. I think about these prions because it's something more recent. So it's possible that you could have them and it didn't, and then you gave it to somebody else, and then it could cause theirs to. I don't know.
Like maybe you're immune to the stacking
Or something, or your
proteins.
yeah, or it didn't make the other ones misform. I don't know.
Huh.
But yeah. So that's what that big scare was.
How many people actually had mad cow?
Well, I don't know about that. They with the Creutzfeldt-Jacobs from 1999 to 2001 was only 129 infections, mainly in the UK and France, and I don't know exactly how it's related, but it was connected with mad cow. It's the same. It's basically prions that are causing that.
Okay.
But I don't know. I don't know if I don't. It wasn't like a massive people. A lot of people were dying from it. I think people got sick, possibly. I don't really remember. I just remember growing up and being like, "Oh, here's mad cow disease."
Yeah, I
don't know.
remember. I remember
The scare about it,
saying,
yeah.
like, "Mad cow!"
And you're gonna get it. But so the lesson to that story is, don't feed dead cows to cows.
That's just stupid.
That's cheap, right? Cheap meat. So,
It's like when I learned about Ebola, and people would be like the cultures that where it's popular in Africa, where and they didn't include that in either because it wasn't a pandemic.
I have some
It
of
was
Ebola,
it
but yeah.
was an epidemic.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
it was in an isolated area, and it
Mhm.
rarely went outside of it. But I remember watching this video, and it's like people would die from it, but in their culture they believed to leave the body out,
Yeah.
and they believed to like kiss the body after it had died. And I'm just like,
No.
I remember being 16 and going, this is not a good idea.
No.
Like, I understand cultural things, but like, adapt.
It's like sometimes we learn things and then you have to change. Well, and that's the thing too about the mad cow disease also is that different countries eat different parts of the animal. So in the
Right.
U.S., it's not probably as big of a deal because we don't generally eat the brain or
And is
nerves.
that where the problem
That's
would
where
be?
the main because that's the problem. So they're grinding up the whole cow.
Okay.
And so it could get into ground meat if you're grinding everything up and not paying attention exactly to what goes where. So it could still get into like ground beef and stuff like that. But in some cultures, in some countries, that stuff is delicacy, like eating monkey brains and things like that. So you're more likely to pass it on because that's where they're concentrated.
Ah.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's a fun side one. Then you have the SARS and the MERS, so the severe acute respiratory syndrome. Those are also coronaviruses. And what's interesting is that the coronavirus right now that's going around, the COVID-19, that's the illness that you get. But the actual name of the virus is a SARS-CoV something. Blah, blah, blah.
So it's SARS.
So it's
Why aren't
basically
we
SARS.
calling it SARS?
I think because they don't want to freak people out.
Well, I think that's kind of past. People are freaking out.
Well, but SARS does have a much higher rate of death. Like their death rate was like a
Mortality
10%,
rate.
and mortality rate was like close to 10%.
Okay.
Now we're comparing what's happening now with that, and that's not really fair because it's ongoing. So we won't really know what the death rate is until everything's done with,
Right.
But both of them it's similar thing. It's a severe acute respiratory syndrome. And the MERS is Middle East respiratory syndrome. So it's basically only in the Middle East. And so SARS was 2003 from Asia. And then, again, bats. And then MERS is 2012 to 2015. But the difference right now is that with SARS, you were contagious when you had symptoms. So you saw you could isolate you, and that's it. The thing with the coronavirus right now, at least the way it is that it seems like there's an incubation period that is up to 14 days long. It may not be. It's not usually that long, I think, but you can basically be passing it before you know that you're sick. And so that's why it's spreading, I think, a lot faster. Right.
Okay.
So it's less deadly, but more contagious. And that's a lot of times what happens. Something that's more contagious oftentimes, I think, lots of times ends up being less deadly, but just spreads easier. They kind of go opposite. Then there was a swine flu in 2009, so another epidemic. That was the H1N1 that's related to the Spanish flu. 200,000 deaths. Bird flu in 2013, that was the H7N9 that had 600 deaths. Polio. I remember the bird flu, yeah.
I remember being confused. I mean, are the birds sick?
Right.
Who's
It
sick?
came from a bird. And there you go. There's polio 2014 to present. And this actually comes from contaminated water, though we thought it's eradicated in the 20th century, but there are still wild cases, Pakistan and Afghanistan. And then Ebola. So this is a bloodborne or other bodily fluids one, and basically there's Ebola still everywhere. there's epidemics of it here and there over the last few years. They pop every year.
But it's primarily in Africa.
Primarily, yes. And almost every one that I saw on the WHO website was Ebola, Africa. Ebola, Africa. Liberia, Guinea, Sierra Leone, some in the U.S. and Europe. Then we had the Zika virus in 2015 to 2016. That was carried by that was a vector-borne. So vector means it's carried by something else. So mosquitoes. And that one caused big fears, especially mainly for pregnant women, because you get it and you get better or whatever. Infected at 1.5 million, but if you got it when you were pregnant, it would cause microcephaly, which basically means small brain and head. And the babies would come out with small brains and small head and lots of defects, and it was very, very bad for that.
I was pregnant in 2015.
Oh yeah, that's right. Like, don't go anywhere. As long as you didn't go. It was basically, again, like Brazil, it was first in Brazil, so it's more. It
was Central South America.
Yeah, more warmer countries. There was another Ebola in 2018, the Republic of Congo, and then the coronavirus of today. So I'm just going to list a few of the different, before we go, the little epidemics of the last 3 years. These are either epidemic or pandemic. And there's multiple different cases of all these. I'm just giving you each type that we found in each year. And basically every time I say Ebola, there's 10 or 20 Ebola outbreaks in different places. But so far in 2020, around the world,
2020?
Yeah,
sorry,
this year.
Okay.
Yeah, since January. Ebola, measles, MERS, dengue fever, yellow fever, Lassa fever, the novel coronavirus, which is COVID-19, and unknown pneumonia cases. 2019, you have MERS, yellow fever, Ebola, measles, dengue fever, vaccine-derived poliovirus, type 1 and 2, Lassa, Rift Valley fever, Zika, cholera, polio, febrile illness, listeriosis, HIV, wild poliovirus, monkeypox, chikungunya, I have no idea what that is, carbapenem-resistant Pseudomonas aeruginosa. No, it's carbapenem. Carbapenem-resistant Pseudomonas aeruginosa.
Are you kidding me?
No, that's the name of it. All these other ones are like measles, dengue, whatever, and then it's I don't know what it is.
They couldn't abbreviate that.
No. Gonococcal, hentavirus, pulmonary syndrome, poliomyelitis, and the hantavirus. And 2018 was Ebola, MERS, typhoid fever, yellow fever, the vaccine-derived polioviruses, the chikungunya, cholera, monkeypox, avian influenza, Nipah virus, measles, Rift Valley fever, listeriosis, dengue, Lassa, and the seasonal reassortant influenza virus and hepatitis E.
Interesting that hantavirus was an epidemic because that's caused by like mice poop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean that's similar to the plague.
True.
I mean that's not by poop, that's by the fleas, whatever. But it can become if it. I mean the thing is with an epidemic, it doesn't have to be transferred between people or something like that. It just has to be an increase in cases.
Yeah.
So if there's enough poop around there. And so one thing I just wanted to bring up right before we end was we did talk that briefly said vaccine-derived poliovirus. We were like, what? Why is there a virus caused by a vaccine? So basically what I wanted to clarify on that is that on rare occasions, if a population is seriously under-immunized, the virus the attenuated virus that they're given for the vaccine gets excreted, and then it can circulates for a long period of time within the population. And if it's allowed to be in the population long enough, it can mutate and get genetic changes. And in very rare instances, the vaccine virus can then genetically change into a form that can actually paralyze, which is then the vaccine-derived
So basically
poliovirus.
contaminates the water.
Yeah, basically, because it's you're excreting it into something and then people are ingesting it because it's supposed to go in. It's an oral vaccine, so it goes into their intestines, and then
it doesn't go into their blood; it goes into their intestines.
So then they excrete it out, right? So they excrete out that attenuated virus that's weakened, and then it gets in there, and it actually, if it's limited, it actually provides immunity to other people in the population because they get it and their body goes, that's weird, and it is able to fight it. But when you're severely under immunized,
Right.
then it can take in. So it's not a problem with the vaccine; it's the problem with under vaccination. So it's that was I thought an important distinction to make.
Yes, we don't want to say that vaccines caused polio.
No, they did not. So it's the need for vaccines for everybody, for everything. If we could only have that. So that was it. Yeah. So that's a little bit about pandemics and epidemics.
Yeah. So basically, the moral of the story is
Wash your hands. So at the end of I listened to this podcast will kill you, which is a very good one if you want to learn a lot more about epidemiology and a lot of different stuff. But the end, their tagline at the end is "Wash your hands, you filthy animals," which is true. I mean, that's basically it, right? So how can you protect yourself from the coronavirus? Wash your freaking hands.
Cough into your
And
sleeve.
don't put your hands on your face.
Oh my gosh, that's
So hard.
to do.
It's so hard because as soon as you say it, you're like,
You're like, don't touch my my hands
oh,
on
that
my
was
face.
face, damn it. But yeah, that's how it gets spread. So,
Crazy.
just elbow bump.
Yeah, that's what I do with my students. I'm like, elbow bump, boop.
Boop. I saw feet bumping before
Yeah.
people. So
Live long and prosper.
yeah, exactly.
Bow and
Don't
curtsy.
kiss people like in Europe. But that's the way to prevent most of these viruses is to
Have
is
good
good hygiene. Right. It really comes down to that. So I mean, it's not going to protect 100%, but it's pretty good.
Well, and what do you think, Cindy, about, some people say, like, because, like, the common flu tends to fade as the weather gets warmer. We're no longer in small confiding spaces with each other. Do you think that the coronavirus will temper? Oh, no words. It's
Get
like-
less with the warmer
Yeah.
season. It's possible. I mean, we just don't know a lot about this virus at all, exactly how it works. But a lot of these viruses and stuff are a seasonal thing that come during.
But some of
certain
these influenzas in the past, they were like 2 years.
Well, yeah, but so remember also there's 2 years, but that's not necessarily consistent throughout the year.
So it's not like a pandemic for the 2 years.
Right. It's just pandemic that they didn't go like over the time span of that year.
There were still cases throughout the year.
Possibly, yeah. Or you could have had just crazy big peaks
Or if it
in
goes
like
into,
winter.
March and then
It
pops
kind
back
of
up
disappears,
in
but this
December.
right. Yeah. So
Do you think the Olympics are going to be canceled?
if nothing changes, if we aren't able to contain it, then I think they probably will,
Yeah.
or at least postpone it, because it's just not smart to have that many people, especially in China.
It's
Is
in,
it? No, it's in Tokyo, right?
It's in Japan.
Yeah. Well, either way, they've got some stuff there too. They've got an outbreak there as well. They closed schools for a month.
Yeah.
there.
They're
So
closing schools here. I mean,
yeah, well, some of the colleges are going to online classes, and which is smart. That's the way the best way to contain it is to not have people gather in large things. Comic-Con is being postponed until summer.
oh really?
Yeah, I
Oh, I
just
can
saw
still
it.
go.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, no, but
But the bad. But that's the way, because the way to stop it from spreading is to stop having people near each other where it can spread to other people, and it'll eventually crap out basically. And they will not have. They've said they will not have another. They won't have a coronavirus vaccine for about a year before they can have it.
Yeah, because they
put
got to
down.
figure it out.
Right. And so remember, like the flu vaccine, people always go, "Oh, I got the flu vaccine. I got the flu that year." I'm like, well, yeah, but you probably didn't get the worst version of that flu, right? The problem is with a lot of these viruses, especially the influenza, is there are so many varieties, right? There's different strains, and so for the flu vaccine, they take the top 3 strains from the year before, 3 or 4, however many strains they do, and put that into the vaccine that they make for the next year, and they're basically guessing at which ones are going to be the worst, and they may not always guess right. But either way, if you get the vaccine, if you do end up getting the flu, which you can't get from the vaccine, you might get some symptoms, but you don't get the flu, as your body's fighting it, like learning how to fight against that virus. But you get whatever flu you do get is most likely not the worst one, because that's what the vaccine is. It's for the worst versions of the flu. So it's important to get your flu vaccine.
Yes.
Especially if you were immunocompromised.
Yes.
Like myself, being a diabetic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right.
Anyway, that's it about pandemics and epidemics.
Yeah. So, thanks for
hands.
going on this journey with us. Make sure after you listen to this podcast, you wash your hands because your phone is disgusting.
That is true. And also, if you're going to use hand sanitizer, it has to be at least 60% alcohol.
Right.
That will kill it.
Yes, I read that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep.
Well,
all right.
Again, if you want to contact us, you can email us at elementalfunpodcast@gmail.com. You can find me at Gracie Runs 5550 on Instagram. That's 50x50. You can also listen to, you can read my blog on run5550.wordpress.com. And
I'm at Pacific Mammal Research, or PACMAM, PACMAM.org, on Facebook and Instagram for my normal marine mammologist job.
Yeah, and I think I said at least on our silicon one, I said, if we get one request to do a YouTube video, we'll do it. We haven't got one yet.
Yeah.
So. Maybe that's for the best.
Only time will tell.
I have a feeling my coworker Zvi is gonna probably request it.
That'd be pretty fun.
Do it. Do it, Zvi.
Do it. You've been called out.
All right. Well, wash your hands. Cover your mouth when you cough.
Stay safe.
And get
healthy.
your vaccines.
Yep.
And take care of yourself. My name is Grace.
My name is Cindy.
And we'll
talk to you later.
Yes.
Thought you'd have a moment.
Wow.
Chips are the perfect podcasting snack.
I think they're perfect. That sounds so loud.